Was that it?
Oh,
Okay.
speaker?
I was wondering. I couldn't figure out where the voice was coming. Oh, there's one down there.
Seminar, CS591S, here from Purdue University. Our speaker today is Ed Finkler. He's the CERIAS webmaster and archive administrator. He's going to talk to us today on real-world web app security. Ed?
Yeah. All right. Well, like I said, I'm the web monkey for CERIAS, and we're going to talk today about some stuff mainly related to open source applications, web application security issues, some of the problems that we're seeing today with them, some of the common attacks that people have against web applications, and some defenses, both code-based, techniques for setting up databases, servers, things like that, we're going to deal with. So, yeah, like I said, today we're going to cover basically the current state of open source web application security. We're going to talk about common kinds of attacks and some defense techniques to do that. I've got a lot of material, and I'm going to try my best to get through all of it. So I really want to encourage questions, but we might want to wait till the end. So if you have questions, write them down, and I will be glad to talk with you about that. If we run out of time here, you can just catch me sometime. You can catch me afterwards, or drop me an email or anything. I can babble about this stuff for hours. So, current state of open source web application security. Basically, as the popularity of these open source web apps has increased, the security implications of them has too. A lot of popular web apps have some really serious security problems right now. We're seeing large levels of installs of things like phpBB, Wordpress, things like that. And security problems with those are affecting lots and lots of people. The interesting thing with this is that actually most of the problems are fairly easy to solve. They're not particularly complex problems. They certainly wouldn't require a strong degree or strong interest in, say, computer science or things like that to solve them. But a lot of the developers who are doing open source web app stuff don't have a lot of background or education, especially in security issues. So how serious is this problem? It's a really big problem with open source apps that are based on easy-to-learn scripting languages. In the last 6 months, probably one that's come out has been extremely problematic is phpBB, which is it's a very popular free bulletin board app. You'll see phpBB on a lot of websites for people who are trying to put together communities. I did some fairly unscientific Google research with it, looking for sites that have the string powered by phpBB, which is sort of an identifier for it. From what I could tell after working with it a little bit, I think conservatively I can say that phpBB probably has about 5 million installs live on the internet right now. Now, in the past, so what are we at, about 8 months now? There have been 32 different vulnerabilities in the NIST National Vulnerability Database. That includes one that was kind of famous a few months ago called the Santy worm. The Santy worm was, as far as we know, was the first time that a worm had been used that affected web applications. It was an interesting piece of work. It basically would query Google to look for phpBB sites that were reporting a version number that was vulnerable to it, and then would direct itself at those, infect those machines, infect that install, and then spread itself from there. Let's see here. PHP Nuke, which is a very popular free portal application. Again, it's a community building kind of thing. With the same kind of fairly unscientific research, we probably see about 1 million installs of PHP Nuke. In the past 8 months, there have been 37 different vulnerabilities listed for this product. This Nuke has been notoriously bad with security. It's been around for a few years, and from the ground up, basically was not designed with security in mind. Being a community site, these kinds of things like phpBB and Nuke are really problematic because when vulnerabilities show up that allow attackers to get into, say, user databases and things like that, you're affecting huge numbers of people. You might have hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people with each one of these portals who can get impacted with that, who have personal information. People have a tendency to reuse passwords and things like that, and that has a really serious implication. Wordpress, which is a really popular free blogging tool, it's a pretty recent product. It's got about 3 million installs. Generally actually has a very good track record for the most part with security. It's relatively low. It's only had 12 vulnerabilities in the last 8 months. They've been generally very good about responding to those things. It was notably, though, hit by CAN 2005-1921, which is a vulnerability in the pair XML RPC library. That was a serious one because a number of different products were based on it. Like I said, Serendipity, Drupal, Groupware, MailWatch, TikiWiki, PHP website, a bunch of stuff like that. Basically, that was a very serious one because it effectively allowed people to execute arbitrary code via XML RPC calls. And it was a vulnerability that affected a lot of applications. And even though it was patched almost immediately, there were a lot of sites that got hit by it. The nature of these vulnerabilities, like I said before, most of these vulnerabilities are really basic mistakes. They're not complex things. These aren't, errors in memory management. These are generally issues with things like input validation and dealing with user input. People taking advantage of developers not being familiar with that or not thinking about it. The shallow learning curve of a lot of these scripting languages, especially PHP, leads a lot of folks to pick it up quickly, which is nice. It's a powerful, PHP, for example, is a very powerful language, but it kind of lets folks who don't necessarily have a lot of background in these kinds of things develop applications that maybe not have an idea of exactly what the implications they are of the kinds of things they try to do. You often find with a lot of people who are doing development with this, concepts of client-side versus server-side stuff tends to get confusing. I see a lot of posts on mailing lists for PHP with folks who get confused about wanting to have PHP modify things that are in the web page when it's down on the client's system, things like that. I think that tends to add to some of the confusion. Security is often just not a top priority feature. That's probably not a new thing for a lot of application development, but it's definitely the case with a lot of web apps. And often these applications are installed by administrators with little coding or security education. These are kind of what you might call one-click install administrators. This is a menu from a control panel for a hosting system, actually a hosting system that I use and I like a lot. But they let you just go ahead and say you just a one-click install. You pick, I want to install phpBB, and you pick it and click it, and there it goes. And these kinds of things these apps are not, they're not being really aimed at other developers. They're aimed at end users. They're installed by people who probably don't have much programming skill and really don't have any intention of learning these kinds of things. These kinds of folks who are installing these things aren't likely to patch or keep up with updates, and it doesn't help the fact that most of these open source web apps, it tends to be difficult to patch stuff. They don't, you don't get let's say a lot of desktop apps will come with a patch that just comes as an executable. You run it, patches the thing. It's easy to develop patches for things like that. Most of these open source web apps, what you'll get is you'll just get a new version, and they'll say, well, they might give you a these files changed list, but oftentimes the upgrade instructions are just upload all the stuff that's in this zip file except for the things that you changed, and don't change those unless it's one of these files. Then you have to change it. It gets very complex.